Warning, watch this to the end. Donald Trump lost to Hillary Clinton by 193,413 human voters, versus electoral college politics loss of 74 votes. In case you're not aware of it, those 74 voters that outvoted 193,413 have an undue level of influence. There's many, many articles and videos you can watch about the Electoral College, but that's the fix that's in. Well, not really. Yes and no. But I want to point out a couple of things here that everybody needs to pay attention to, both Democrat and Republican. And you need to pay attention. We'll start with the overtly liberal, libtard statements I'm going to make, because I'm going to make them first to get them the hell out of the way, because you've all heard them. I'm a liberal. I'm a flaming liberal. Molotov cocktail. But anyway, Republicans have only won the popular vote, meaning really being voted in by the masses, once since 1988. That was George W. Bush. Now I want you to think about that. Really slowly. All right? Better or worse, think. It's theoretically possible, because of the Electoral College, for a candidate to win the White House with less than 30% of the popular vote. He can be outvoted over 2-1 and still be in, theoretically. Hillary Clinton marks the 5th U.S., probably, we don't know yet, but it's probably true. Just as we already know who's won, we already know how much we have lost with. Hillary Clinton will be the 5th U.S. presidential candidate to win the popular vote, but lose the election due to the Electoral College's quirks and defects or advantages. 1824, Andrew Jackson versus John Quincy Adams. You probably recognize both names. Which one won? Do you know your history? Samuel Tilden versus Rutherford B. Hayes. You might remember both names, but if the only reason you would is one of the names, and it would only be because that was the winner. That was 1876. 1888, the time when my lenses were made. Actually, afterwards. Grover Cleveland versus Benjamin Harrison. No, it's not one of the Beatles. And the year 2000, Gore took 48.4% of the popular vote and lost to Bush's 47.9%, a very clear margin here, but won by 5 electoral votes, which is the reason it was so contested. No, you all voted, we all, as a country, voted for Gore, and we got Bush instead, because of the Electoral College. Is this okay? Hillary Clinton, 59,458,773 voters versus 232 electoral voters. Donald Trump, 59,265,360 voters versus the 306 electoral votes. In terms of total votes cast, about 124.5 million people in the United States voted out of the entire population, which means not only is the Electoral College kind of sounding unfair now, we're represented by the only people who got off the dead button and voted. Well short of 2012's 128.5 million and 2008's 131 million. Yeah. States decide how their electoral votes are decided in the United States Electoral College. Maine and Nebraska award electoral votes by a mix of congressional district and popular vote, rather than winner take all. You know that gerrymandering and districting that happens that is used to rig elections in each state? Think really slowly. I'll include a link to gerrymandering. The body that elects the President and Vice President of the United States every 4 years is the Electoral College. Citizens of the United States do not directly elect the President or the Vice President. Instead, they choose electors who usually pledge to vote for a particular candidate, and winning is based on the number and size of states that each candidate has a majority in. And usually they're winner-take-all or some other such mix. Yeah, each state decides it differently depending on the advantageousness of it. The reasoning behind this originally, and you can think about it this way, is a state with a low population but a bunch of resources that people would want to vote on and manipulate, they would have an unfair disadvantage for having a large amount of materials to work with. Depending on how you feel about haves versus have-nots, steal from the rich, give to the poor, or earn your merit, we have a system that is not perfect. The 91st Congress from 1969 to 1971. Why does everything happen? Anyway. H.J. Res 681 proposed a direct election of President and Vice President because that's the only one that anybody would contest. I mean, really. The President, as we all know, is under checks and balances and limitations. Do we want the Electoral College? This would require a runoff when no candidate received more than 40% of the vote, so that you'd have to decide. And if it happened again, we could go back to the old system where the first and second place winners become President and Vice President, so you have some people that have been screaming at each other for several months, wanting to kill each other, one of which has an advantage in shooting the other. Think about that. Think about Hillary Clinton as Vice President and Trump as President. Actually, I think that would be best at this point because this country just got split right down the middle to where people were punching each other out in the street last night. In that case, of course, it was actually two liberals beating the shit out of each other, which I thought was funny. And I'm a liberal. It failed to pass the Senate. This was the closest Congress has ever come to amending the Electoral College since 1804, because it passed the House in 1969 and would have become law. In 1969, we could have had a law that said that the popular vote would be dominant. In a close election, do you believe that the popular vote should do it? Remember, the thing that kept getting pounded into everybody's, whichever end you want to think of, specifically by the Trump campaign, was that the election is rigged and that your vote counts. But he lost the election by popular vote to Hillary Clinton. Don't forget that. And I'm going to repeat, Republicans have only won the popular vote rarely since 1988. They haven't. Except for one time, and that was George W. Bush. Dear Republicans, you're not the popular vote. Dear Republicans, we are all under, chain gang rules here, because they usually ramrod the House, Senate, your local legislature, just like the politicians on the other side do. When we get a race that's this close on the popular vote, should the popular vote be dominant if it doesn't match closely enough? In that case, you'd have to decide that in 1824, 1876, 1888, and the year 2000 Al Gore incident, we would have completely different outcomes. And this year, was it really a populist thing you were hoping for? Do you really believe that your vote should have counted? If you believe your vote should have counted, Hillary's the president. If you don't give a damn about your vote, it's Trump that should be president. Because 193,413 people got outvoted by less than 80 people. Or you could just decide that Alaska, because it has a low population count, should have no effect on elections. Which would you do to solve this? What is your grand plan to fix this? Al Gore, with the popular vote, but having lost a very narrow margin on the Electoral College, and all the districting and gerrymandering, and the admissions by a couple of people on camera because they're stupid, that they deliberately gerrymander to make sure they win an election when they can't win it, and they deliberately make sure that they push away voters and disenfranchise voters. And voting tampering, in case you're not aware of it, has been happening both sides, right? Actually, no. Being able to catch someone doing it is really difficult. Someone asked me about this. Real-world voter fraud is done systematically, and it's just slightly more often with the Republican Party, and they still don't get the popular vote. So if you're a liberal, you have the right to tell people if they're a Republican, you might win by cheating the system, gerrymandering, and rigging elections, but we know that we have the popular vote. And you might also want to add, and now we're going to ignore the presidency because it doesn't matter, and we're going to work on local issues, and every midterm election, we're going to rip your nuts off. And all you Republicans out there could say to yourselves, we're fake populists, but we won. Right? We gotten everybody angry? I have no idea how to solve this. This isn't a solvable thing. Do you want look up which state has the highest population and find out what their electoral vote is? One of the other proposals, if anybody's curious, I'll stop now. One of the proposals was to make it illegal for people to redistrict in such a way that it's politically motivated and have it based on nice square county shapes. Most counties are done. Just do it counties. Screw the districts. And have the Electoral College based on population, finances, and resources. Literally use an equation. There's an equation like this. I forgot what it is. It's actually a libertarian think tank that came up with it, where it would literally make it so balanced that you would get about the same thing as the Electoral College and popular vote agreeing with each other, but it had the effect of making the popular vote more dominant and being the cutoff point where if the popular vote goes one way or another, then you have to kind of deal with it. Because at that point, you're dealing with a divided nation where people feel cheated. I mean, that is... Hillary Clinton won by almost 200,000 votes, all right? The hanging Chad thing ain't got nothing on it. All right? The number of popular vote at one point for Al Gore was something like 300 votes that counted. All right? How would you solve this? Should we? Does it matter? Checks and balances exist to keep the president from pushing the button, right? It really does. What did you rabble-rouse for? What did you advocate for? What really happened? Are you being honest with yourself? I'm an extremist. I would make a law that says if it's this close in the popular vote, and the Electoral College does this stuff, the electors are forbidden from electing again because it didn't match. And both president and vice president have to be both these individuals, and I would legally forbid them from being armed and make Hillary Clinton be the vice president to Donald Trump just because that's entertaining as hell. But both of them would have the ability to overrule each other, so they'd only be able to do something if they both agreed on it. Now think about this for a second. That means nothing's going to happen unless both sides can agree on it, or you have to do it the way you do in the legislature. Watching Congress kick the hell out of each other. Hey, why don't we do it like British Parliament and everything? Watch those guys. You think C-SPAN's boring? You should watch them. It's a hockey game. Thanks for watching. Have a good day. Good luck with it. And I think we're going to do okay.